In a heartfelt national address, President Tinubu addressed Nigerians on the ongoing nationwide protests. President Tinubu, in his Sunday morning speech, recognized the young protesters' desire for a better Nigeria, but lamented the loss of lives in Borno, Jigawa, Kano, and Kaduna, that's in the northern part of the country, along with the destruction of public facilities and looting. And he urged protesters to suspend further actions and embrace dialogue, stressing the need for unity and cooperation to rebuild the nation.
The president reaffirmed his commitment to maintaining public order and protecting lives and property, emphasizing that the government will not allow political agendas to disrupt the nation. Highlighting economic reforms, he mentioned progress in revenue growth and infrastructure projects. He encouraged youth engagement through initiatives like the Student Loan Scheme and Consumer Credit Cooperation. The president called for collective effort to build a brighter future, ensuring visible and tangible results of good governance. He urged security forces to maintain peace responsibly, emphasizing the paramount importance of safety and security of all Nigerians.
I speak to you today with a heavy heart and sense of responsibility, aware of the turmoil and violent protests unleashed in some of our states. Notably, among the protesters were young Nigerians who desired a better and more progressive country where their dreams, hope, and personal aspiration would be fulfilled. I am especially pained by the loss of lives in Borno, Jigawa, Kano, Kaduna, and other states, the destruction of facilities in some states, and the wanton looting of supermarkets and shops, contrary to the promise of protest organizers that the protest will be peaceful across the country. The destruction of properties set us back as a nation, as scarce resources will be again used to restore them. I commiserate with the families and relations of those who have died in the protest. We must stop further bloodshed, violence, and destruction. As the president of this country, I must ensure public order in line with the constitutional oath to protect the lives and property of every citizen. Our government will not stand idly by and allow a few with a clear political agenda to tear this nation.
And to unpack this, we're joined by Stanley Ikechukwu, Head of Operations, SBM Intelligence, as well as virtually Kelechi Deka, a public affairs analyst, joining us virtually. We also have joining us, virtually is Dr. Nasiru Wasagu, a public political affairs analyst, joins us from Abuja to unpack this.
Of course, we believe that Dr. Nancy Wasagu will be joining us later to further give, talks and credibility to what it is that we're going to be discussing this morning. But right here in the studio, we're going to start with Stanley Ikechukwu, even as we continue to look at the president's statement. You just watched him, Stanley, the president of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, talking passionately to Nigerians that there is a need for them to sheath their swords, if I could paraphrase, and say that they should come to the table to have some sort of dialogue. But then let me just get your feel from this. What do you make of this president's response?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. The president's speech wasn't inspiring at all. It does not sound of a renewed hope. This is the same thing we've seen over and over and over after every protest. There's always come out to say something. I really do not even know why Nigerians are eager to hear the president speak. Because after speaking, what happens? Nothing happens. We've had this situation. There was the EndSARS protest. We wanted to hear from the president. The president came out and he spoke. What happened after then? Nothing. Now we're saying we want to hear from the president. We've heard from the president now. What do you think will happen? I don't think anything is going to happen.
When you say the speech of the president isn't inspiring, what would have made that speech inspiring to you?
No, I don't think we need a speech at this point in time.
So what do we need?
We need action. We need to see work. We need to see that food prices are coming down. We need to see that insecurity is being fought head on. We need to see cost of governance reduced. Those are what we should be talking about, not speech. No, the speech does not work for us anymore. We're tired of hearing speeches.
But okay, so let me just direct this to Kelechi Deka, who's actually on the virtual channel. Okay, so Kelechi, let's get your feel as regards what the president said in the national broadcast. Stanley just said now that it is not inspiring. Do you also feel uninspired by the president's speech this morning?
I mean, I will be shocked with myself if I was expecting to be inspired by any speech at all, because first and foremost, there are issues that have been on the table for a long time over the last few months that we were expecting to be addressed, and nobody has made any effort to address them. So when we are looking at the speech to inspire us, first we have to understand the fact that over time Nigerians have lost. There's a high level of trust deficit between the masses and those in governance. The masses don't even trust those in governance anymore. So whatever they're saying, nobody cares about it. Nobody wants to listen to it, and nobody takes it to heart. I heard when you said that it was a heartfelt, kind of speech and stuff. Nigerians don't believe anything about being heartfelt. Nigerians want to see some of the issues they complain about. I mean, we are talking about inflation at 34%, and that's official figures. And when I mean official figures, you should know what the real figures should be. So, and food inflation is at the highest level it has ever been since I was born. So when you factor this into place, you know why the people are so angry.
When you talk about distrust, there seems to be distrust between the people and the trust they have for the government. How can we begin to rebuild trust and ensure that people now trust the government?
The best way you have to rebuild trust is to engage in acts, engage in activities, start policy implementations that have trickle-down effect on the lives of the people. I mean, if you say there is no more fuel subsidy, now we are paying so much for fuel, why are we still queuing for fuel? Why are we still having fuel scarcity every day? Because part of the promises that was made to us was that if we remove the fuel scarcity, the fuel subsidy, we are no more going to be having fuel scarcity. Now, fuel subsidy has been removed. Prices have been rising astronomically since it was removed, but we are still queuing in fuel stations. I mean, I was in Abuja during the riots. If you see the number of cars lined up in fuel stations, come to Lagos is the same. So these are how to rebuild trust. If you say there's no more going to be scarcity, let there not be scarcity. That's the first step in rebuilding trust. If you say their efforts have been made to bring down food prices, I want to go to the market and feel that thing. I want to feel that, yes, I can, 1,000 naira worth of tomato is now enough for me to even prepare scrambled eggs. That's how to rebuild a trust. It's not by saying it, it's by doing.
Okay, let me just, just to pick on what you touched on regarding fuel situation in Nigeria, PMS, looking at reforms being made by the government. Recall, there was a directive by the government, for the NNPCL to sell crude oil now to Dangote refinery. And this, they have said, would reduce our cost in Forex. If you got the figures about we spending about 40% of our Forex, on importing, fuel. And that, in a way, would now begin to reduce our costs and spendings on, importing fuel. Is that a glimmer of hope in terms of oil production in Nigeria?
You see, if you have an understanding of the oil industry, you will also appreciate the fact that the cost of logistics is quite minute when you compare to overall cost. That refinery is located in an export processing zone. It means that that refinery is by stature is in a foreign land, and you're not going to buy fuel from that refinery at prices that are different from what is being sold in the international market. Yes, there's going to be a lot of, at least the issue of scarcity, having it available, it might have an impact, but we still wait because the refinery has not started producing PMS anywhere.
All right, at this point, we bring Dr. Nasiru Wasagu into this discourse, a public and political affairs analyst. Dr. Wasagu, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure to be here.
Okay, so now demands have been made, and before now, the protesters have said, as of yesterday anyway, that the president needs to come out and address them, or Nigerians. Stanley said, we don't need the president to speak. We need him to start working. The president has come out to say that policies have been rolled out, and what he needs is time for these policies to begin to reap the fruits. From all of this, Dr. Wasagu, what is it that you feel protesters or Nigerians want? What do you think is even meaningful at this particular time that Nigerians can hold on to within the shortest possible time to ensure that these policies are coming to bed? Let it fly. What do you think?
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, apologies, would have you respond. Apologies, would have you respond.
That, what Mr. Kelechi has said about...
apologies, we'll have you respond in a moment. I understand we're about to go on a short break. Hold your thoughts. When we get back, we'll take your reaction. Stay with us here. Thank you for staying with us. You're live with News Central TV. Day 4 of the End Bad Governance protests, happening in Nigeria. We here are covering it live for you. We have our correspondents all across Nigeria to bring us live feed as they unfold. I am Adebola Adeduba here with my colleague.
And I'm Lekon Obanjo. And before we went on that break, we're actually talking to Dr. Nasiru Wasagu as regards what Nigerians really want, or should I say what the protesters also want, because the talk was around the president should address Nigerians. It's done that. Now we're getting feelers that he shouldn't talk, but then what needs to be done is for his policies to come to bed. And the president has said that you guys should give him time. So I'm asking Dr. Wasagu, what do you make of this? What is it that Nigerians and protesters want out of this?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, let me just correct this. I would like for you to stop using two different analogies to describe either the protesters and Nigerians. I prefer we just say what the Nigerians want. The protesters are still Nigerians, and whatever they are asking for are genuine concerns for the welfare and well-being of the country. Having said that, I believe what Mr. Kelechi has said, it's actually the albatross here in getting what government is doing to be fruitful or to be clearly seen by the people, which is trust deficit. As long as there's trust deficit, you see, some people said that the president should come out and speak to us. However, those people asking for president to come out and speak are already saying that we don't want any more speeches. We don't want to. Yeah, so that is to just underscore the issue of the trust deficit. But quite a few things that I'm impressed about in the past weeks, not just from the speech, from the sale of the crude oil to Dangote, as much as Mr. Kelechi has leveled the export-free zone to be on a foreign land, the fact that within the boundaries of this country, crude oil is being refined, and that crude oil is being sold to the refiner at Naira rate, will have a significant impact. And as much as you reduce the cost of transportation, which of course with the CNG and the 1 million kits to be provided to transporters of goods and food items, you might see significant reduction in the cost of food items. You must know that there isn't really to say that food items are scarce, but rather the purchasing power is what is not available, because even as it is right now, we are still the one feeding most of the African countries neighboring Nigeria. So it is the purchasing power and the social well-being of Nigerians that is actually the issue here, which the government needs to do a whole lot more for it to be glaring in the lives of non-Nigerians. Of course, the government needs to engage the grassroots so that...
Dr. Wasagu, I think we just lost connection with Dr. Wasagu there. Stanley, I come to you now. Now, the president has said that you guys, not you guys, or should I say the protesters, should come for a dialogue, that, you know, there should be an end to these protests, and he's like opening up the doors for some sort of talks to happen so that minds can be rubbed and we can begin to fashion out ways to accelerate his policies and begin to reap the dividends. Now, at this time, don't you think it's what the protesters or the demonstrators should be looking towards?
So, yeah, that dialogue at the end makes sense, you know, because to resolve any situation or conflict, you can always use the barrel of a gun. You know, it might just cascade into something more, you know, something that you can't really control. So dialogue does make sense, but the problem is, after dialoguing, what happens? That is my own concern. We've been having dialogues, we've been talking, we've been saying, have some patience for these policies to begin to work. Patience here can also mean process. You know, Nigerians are patient. Some Nigerians understand process. And don't forget that process could also be a waste of time. Some type of process, yes. You could wait and follow it through, and at the end, you're at the wrong place. You have to start again. So that's what Nigerians are saying. Come out and show us what you're doing, carry us along, so we know where you're going. The president is like a driver where we're the passengers. We know this road too, as much as he knows the road. Just like going from, say, here to Lekki, there are like two major ways to go. You go through either Third Mainland Bridge or you go through the Eko Bridge. But you see the driver going through Ekpe. I don't know how he got to Ekpe. Maybe he probably went through Ondo. You know, that's a long journey. I don't think anybody wants to wait. In that process, you might still not get to that Ekpe. So why not just go through the direct process that we know, so that we're sure that this your policies, you're been following it, and we're also following it to make sure that this is the end result. You know, dialogue is good, but after dialogue, are we going to see the end results? That is what Nigerians are more important.
Now, talking about policies, some persons have said, you know what, it's too early in the day to accuse the president. He's barely 1 year in office. And looking at all the policies he has rolled out so far, talking about the CNG buses, activating the student loan, talk about the, passing the bill into law now, the new minimum wage. Would you say the president is doing enough to help alleviate the suffering of the masses?
Well, not to take away so much credit from him, you know, some of those policies he has rolled out are good policies. Nobody is saying that those policies are not good, but the execution process is where we have a problem. You cannot say you are rolling out the CNG buses process without even... You came on the inauguration day and say fuel subsidy is over. Yes, economically, we cannot continue to pay fuel subsidy. But at that point in time, the president has not even looked at what NNPC is doing to even understand if it is the right time to end it, or put in some shock absorber, you know, start the process of this CNG, not 1 year after. 1 year after, look at what the fuel subsidy removal has cost. Cost of living has gone up, cost of transportation has gone up. Any economy that lacks energy, that's power, it will not be competitive in the international market. It's not possible. If you look at the big economies of the world, like China, they subsidize power. America subsidizes power. You know, the factories need to work for us to be productive. We are not productive, and you're taking away the only source at which we can generate power to be productive.
Well, reports indicate that the president, is not the one who actually removed fuel subsidies. It's long been removed before he came into power. He only executed what has been signed
Or
off.
announced the execution.
Exactly. And just to also highlight what he said, when he made his address to Nigerians about demonstrations in Nigeria, he said it is the removal in fuel subsidies to block the greed, I'm quoting him now, and profits that smugglers and rent seekers made. What do you say to that?
Of course, we cannot continue to subsidize fuel for Cameroon and Benin Republic and the likes. They say our total fuel consumption is around 55 million liters. It is not possible, most especially at this point in time where people cannot even afford fuel. If you look at the roads in Lagos and across Nigeria, the roads are scanty. We don't even have traffic as we used to have. What does that imply? It means that people cannot afford to drive their cars anymore. People have parked their cars at home and now engaging public transport, which makes sense, But removing fuel subsidy at that point in time, is not helping the matter.
When would have been the right time?
You need to put the shocks in place. You need to put the shock absorbers in place. Then you can take away the fuel. Nobody is saying that fuel subsidy should not go. It's not helping the economy. We're spending, like you said, over 40% of the FX, to import fuel. What has happened to the refineries? They keep putting money in those refineries and they are not producing anything. So we need to streamline what our problem is. We need to streamline what our problem is and take it heads on. Are the refineries working? No. Scrap it or you sell it. Is there a refinery up ready to produce? Yes. Supply them fuel. Anything that would ease the sufferings and alleviate the poverty in the land. I think the president should begin to toe that line. That's all what we're saying.
Okay, so Mr. Kelechi Deka, I come to you now. We're still talking about issues around policies, how timely it is, if it is misplaced, and if it will achieve anything. In all the policies that President Tinubu has mentioned today, is there anyone that you think speaks more to you, that you're optimistic about, that Nigerians can also hold on to and say, you know what, let's see how this goes. Maybe there could be some economic transformation and, well-being, improvements in standard of living for Nigerians. The reason I'm saying this is because we don't want a situation where we're beginning to prolong matters. And if we cannot control assemblies, protests, demonstrations, it might lead to casualties, as we've seen in the north, something we may need to prevent. So would you toe that line in terms of looking at these policies, looking at which one speaks to you more that Nigerians can actually hold on to?
Yeah, I would like to start from where Stanley stopped. Some of these things is that before you want to start implementing certain policies, you have to also look at the multiplier effects of these policies and know how it's going to impact on the people. And when you check how it's going to impact on the people, you put cushions in place to make sure that when the policies are rolled out, its impact will not likely be as hard as it would have been. That's how it is in places where people put the horse before the cart. But where people put the cart before the horse, they start implementation of policies first. Then after that, and people start crying, then we start looking for how to mitigate the impact on the people. And that is part of the thing that caused the hardship in the land and impacted people to such an extent that they called out for demonstrations and protests. But these policies in themselves are not bad. Okay, you raised the issue, about the president saying that part of removal of the fuel subsidy was to curtail the greed. But you followed the brickbat between Dangote and the NNPC. And Dangote was also able to raise the fact that even with the removal of the fuel subsidy, some entrenched interests, we are also still making huge sums of money from the people of Nigeria, from the government of Nigeria, which means that what we experienced was a shift, was a kind of a relay race. Somebody changed the button from one runner to another runner, and the same another greedy interest group taking over from the greedy interest group that's been siphoning the revenue of the country. So that's issue of trust. When we hear these kind of things, when we watch these kind of things happen, we are not likely. You don't expect us to put trust that other policies are going to come into place. Okay, for another example, the cost of governance. Nobody has said anything about it. I expected the president to come out openly and say that from now on, the Orosanye panel that's been lying there for a long time, which he himself said that he has started implementing, we want to know that from this time to this time, certain people in government, especially the top hierarchy of government, this and this and this and this, they are not going to be made available for them. Not a situation whereby we are building new presidential mansion or we are buying new presidential aircraft, and why you have over 120 million Nigerians that are multidimensionally poor. There is no way you expect us to trust that these other policies are going to work.
Now, talking about the costs of governance, if you recall recently, the National Assembly mentioned they are cutting down their salary by 50%. Do you think that is enough?
If they are cutting down their salaries by 50%, first and foremost, we have to know, can we really say that we have an idea of how much they earn and how much all their allowances, each and every one of them, both the known and the unknown? What of the issue of constituency projects, which in itself is an aberration in a presidential democratic system? So some of these things, I think some of these things are just, trying to kind of whitewash an already bad situation. We want to see deep thoughts. When you see a senator moving from one place to another, you see about 20 vehicles. All these vehicles are, SUVs with fuel capacity of up to 100 and 120 liters. And that takes about 82,000 naira to fill the tank of each of those Land Cruiser vehicles. So when you times them by 10, then you know how much it costs to move one senator from one place to another place. And everybody who's driving that car is being paid. From whose purse is that payment being made? Those are the things I want to see.
Okay. Dr. Owasagu, let's talk to you now. From what Mr. Decker has mentioned, it has to do more around, saboteurs of government. The government over time would always have a fantastic policy, ink on paper, beautiful, well written. But when it comes to implementation, there's always a challenge. Talking about the Dangote refinery and the issues around allocations and all whatnot. Now, Dangote made some salient points and said there are some cabals, not only even in the oil industry, in the power sector, in other sectors of the economy that are actually causing inhibitions when it comes to the implementation of governments. Now, is it that the government does not know these people and know how to ring them, or cut their wings and scale above them to ensure that their policies are well implemented and transforms the country? Or is there something sinister that we need to understand about these cabals that a lot of us are not being privy to?
Well, first of all, when you say cabals, Dangote is not a protester. Dangote is also part of the cabal himself. Everywhere.
What are your facts to prove that?
What are the facts? What are the facts? What are the facts to say that there are cabals? What are the facts to say that there are cabals? It's just like the way we define lobby here in the third world economy. We make it to sound lobby it's illegal. Whereas you go to other standardized democracies, you see that there are lobbyists who go about between the Congress and the government. It's actually a legal process, So saying that there is a cabal, you look at the definition of a cabal, are people who are very close to the corridors of power, who determine and shape government policies to suit their political or to suit their economic interest. It may not necessarily be devilish. However, Dangote himself has said that he has received over $2.5 billion from the CBN in building this refinery. Before this fracas, did you know about that? So what I'm trying to say here is that the cabal, or whatever name you may want to give them, are very, very powerful within the corridors of power. within the corridors of power. It's not that with the wave of a wand that the government can push them over. And likewise, saboteurs, people who are willing to spend as much as government is spending in order to sabotage.
Why can't they, Dr. Wasagu, why can't they be identified? These are perceived problems. People described as problems of the nation. Yesterday, some of our guests said the president has fantastic ideas, but he has a cabinet that is struggling to interpret the renewed hope agenda. We're also talking about cabals. We're talking about inhibitors of a prosperous government in terms of policies and implementation. So why can't we address these people, address these issues, and take them out?
No, if you're asking why can't we, I think it's a very wrong question to ask an analyst. You're asking why can't we to the person, why can't you to the person who has the authority to do so, asking him why can't he do this or why can't he do that. But what we are saying are things that should be put in place. As Kelechi has rightly said, he has outlined things about trust deficit that government should do, and quite a few things that the president has said that an analyst will look at economically and give kudos to, but then you will have your question marks as to the implementation. For example, our revenue to debt service has been reduced from 97% to 68% in the last 13 months. That should account for something. Productivity is gradually increasing in the non-oil sector. All of that. There are some things that you look at on paper, without being sentimental, that you see as an economist or as a political analyst, that this is a good trajectory. However, knowing the kind of people we are, in Nigeria today or in any third world countries today, majority of people you see shouting against corruption probably is because they aren't beneficiaries of them. You have a certain states today that are shouting that don't arrest our governor, he is clean. So this is the nature of what we're saying. But if you're going to analyze theoretically what is on paper, what is this policy and how good it is and what is the trajectory, that is what we're talking about, rather than you have questions to someone who may sound like a government apologist or somebody holding brief for government. Nobody here is speaking for government, but we're trying to analyze what these policies are. And I feel that there are some take-homes from the trajectory of the government policy, recent government policies. However, collectively as a people, don't forget that people in government are Nigerians as well, with relatives down to the grassroots. Everybody is connected to someone somehow. That is the communal setting we have in Africa, and that differentiates us from the Western world, but we need to identify the things that are wrong and accept them as wrong as a people, whereas whatever is right, we push them to what is right. For example, I give you a clear example right now. We know how terrible government policies have been. We know the situation in the country, but we need to be careful because there is a thin line there. In speaking against government, somehow the grassroots on the streets protesting, you might sound like someone who is supporting the violence outside of the street. So that is how yes, please.
Yes, I would like to take you up on so many things you talked about, but we are out of time. We'll come back to that. I would love to touch on the IOCs in Nigeria and how Dangote had mentioned he struggled getting crude oil from them and he had to import. But then let's hang in there. Let's tell you that President Bola Tinubu's Sunday morning broadcast has elicited mixed reactions among protesters in Lagos. While some insist that the nationwide demonstrations will continue, others believe the protests should be suspended following the president's appeal. One protester, identified as Barrister JP, urged his fellow demonstrators at the Ojota protest ground to suspend the protests and create room for dialogue with the government.
And I do not want to be a part of something that they will now come and be telling me, JP, somebody committed treasonable felony. Come and stand for that person. No, I don't have that time. If I want to stand for, I will collect money for somebody I'm standing for. But I'm telling you that this time, we should jojo, not war. The president has spoken, and we should listen to the president first and see what action the president is going to take. Have I made myself clear? Yes. Please, let us calm down and see what the president is going to do. If the president says he's going to reduce fuel pump, he will tell us. If he says yam is going to, foodstuff will reduce, he will tell us. But not us trying to, if he had not spoken, then we would have continued the protest.
So this actually highlights what I mentioned earlier. So I'll direct this to Stanley. That is one of the, should I say, vanguard of the protests that has gone on since August 1, saying that if the president speaks, then we should all calm down and stop the protests. He has spoken. And I recall Ebun Olu Adeburuwa, solicitor of the organizers of this End Bad Governance, also came out to say we should tone it down because of the few violences that we've recorded in the north, particularly in Abuja. He actually said these protests should end so that we don't continue to have casualties. I talked about that earlier. Yeah. We're bringing that back into perspective now. And I'd like to get your reaction from this, because this seems to be a reason of thoughts.
So, you see, violence is something that we all must condemn. We don't support it. It won't lead to anywhere. But the speech that the president gave was a mere speech. What I wanted to see from that speech was more like an order, like an executive order to say, at this point in time, I'm cutting my cabinet. We have 36 states, including Abuja. We should have 37 ministers, not 40-something. At this point in time, I'm cutting the the number of ministers I have to 36. That's cutting down on cost of governance. At this point in time, we're cutting down the cost of running government, by 50%. These are what we want to see in that speech. The speech that the president gave is one that you use to rock a child to sleep. No inspiration, no hope, not to even talk about renewing it. So I don't want to say that the protest should go on, but we need to see actions before we leave the streets.
All right, well, Stanley, thank you so much. We have to go on a very short break now. We still have more to talk about as we got the president's speech and reactions that Nigerians have been, sharing as regards that. But then we'll be back to talk more. Just stay with us. It's a special broadcast on End Bad Governance right here on New Central Television. We have been engaging Stanley Ikechukwu, Head of Operations, SBM. We still have Kelechi Deka, Public Affairs Analyst, on a virtual channel. Dr. Nasir Wasagu, Public and Political Affairs Analyst, also virtually, even as we continue to engage and talk about these protests that has gone on, being today, day 4 of this particular demonstration. Before we go back to our guests, we have our international correspondent, Afia Hagen, who would also be talking to us and giving us updates on the United Kingdom's protest, where British police have detained a number of protesters in Nottingham, and far-right activists clashed with a counter-racism gathering. Now, this is an unrest tied to misinformation about a mass stabbing that killed 3 young girls spread throughout the UK. And the clashes mark the 4th day of unrest in several towns and cities following last Monday's frenzied knife attack in Southport near Liverpool on England's northwest coast.
Now, the violence, which has sent scores of arrests across England and put Britain's Muslim community on edge, presents the biggest challenge yet of Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer's month-old premiership. And for more on this, we are joined by our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, what's the latest on the protests that spread across England last night?
Well, at least 100 people have been arrested in the protest that took place last night. So there was unrest in Hull, in Liverpool, Manchester, Stoke-on-Trent, Blackpool, and in Belfast, which is actually in Northern Ireland. So you saw shops being looted, bricks being thrown, and police being attacked in some places. Now, in Liverpool, you had about 1,000 anti-immigration protesters some shouting Islamophobic slurs, and they were countered by counter-protesters, anti-fascist and anti-racism protesters, and police struggled to keep these two groups apart. And now the jumping off point is being seen as that frenzied knife attack which you spoke about, which took place in Southport on Monday. But now it's deemed that these protests are in that name, but are nothing to do with that. It's an excuse for groups of predominantly young white men, sort of geared up by Tommy Robinson, who heads up the English Defence League, which are a racist movement, a racist right-wing movement that exists here in the United Kingdom, and by bots. Foreign actors, these bots are Russia-based, and that has been proven online, which are spreading false narratives about who was responsible for that knife attack in Southport on Monday, and therefore whipping up this right-wing, fascist, racist, Islamophobic sentiment across the UK, and that is what's fueling these protests.
But what's been the spectrum of reaction to these protests?
Well, Keir Starmer, who we haven't seen actually since he gave a press conference on Thursday. Parliament is in recess at the moment for 6 weeks, back on the 2nd of September. It's thought that he should be going on holiday next week. A lot of people saying that perhaps this is not the best time to do that, but he has said that he will give police forces the government's full support to take action against extremists attempting to sow hate. Now, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says anyone involved in criminal disorder and violent thuggery will pay the price and that communities need to feel safe. Now, the policing minister this morning has been talking on the news, and she said that there are sufficient prison places for these people causing this disorder, that they will be arrested, they will be dealt with, and we could be heading to a time where we might see 24-hour courts in session to be able to process these people who have been whipping up this hate, and as well as the people who have been marching on these rallies. So the government do seem to be gearing up into action, but a lot of people, especially black and brown communities here in the United Kingdom, would like to see the government being stronger, and maybe a statement from Keir Starmer, Prime Minister, to condemn what's happening going forward.
Well, thank you so much for bringing context to the situation in UK. Our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Many thanks.
Of course, based on international and domestic laws, everyone has the right to protest once we're in a democratic situation or democratic setting. People have the right to express their grievances, but the caveat there is that it must be peaceful. I'm going to direct this to Mr. Kelechi Deka. Let's just take away the topic or the focus for the protest that we just detailed in UK and look at how it has been carried on, because when you look at the setting, it's not as though it's in a confined environment. People are on the streets. You see the way the police is interacting with the citizens, all right? And you also discover that the fact that arrests are being made, it doesn't look as though it is violent. So when you do a comparison with that and what obtains in Nigeria, what does that tell you?
You know, you can't address this kind of issue in isolation of the socio-economic development of a given society. You're looking at the UK, then you have to factor in both from the literacy rate to education rate to standard of living, and every other thing. When you put all these things together, then you also have to factor in the democratic institutions, the legal institutions. They have all these things in place, and people have grown over the years to get acclimatized to the fact that the right to protest, the right to expression is one that is fundamental to the citizen. And over time, they've come to, I accept it, they've come to, trust in the ability of their institutions to handle these things. But from time to time, you also have some crazy people, like all those skinheads and all those ultra-right groups coming to try to cause violence. But the system has things in place. They have instruments in place to tackle this thing. Have you ever made an effort to try to check the number of policemen per individual in the UK, and you compare it to the number of policemen per citizens in Nigeria? Then you find out why what we do here always tend to end in the in a kind of violent or kind of get out of hand, because everything is connected to everything. You cannot isolate some of those socioeconomic indices from how the humans living within the social milieu react and how they carry on.
Let me get the line of thought of Dr. Wasagu. I mean, we've seen alleged, I should say, reports of policemen killing unarmed civilians. We've also seen the alleged reluctance by the police officers to protect protesters. How do you perceive this?
Well, as alleged, as you reported, it's an alleged allegation, but like he has rightly said, the things you need to take in place from the education, literacy level of our people and the social demographics, in comparison to what you see in other climes, there are people who don't want, the protest is meant to shake the table. Actually, so if you have to use that word, but you have a lot of Nigerians who don't want to shake the table. They want to break the table, because we have seen videos of people's homes being ransacked, people's businesses, worship centers, churches and mosques being vandalized and all of that. So you see, the aim has shifted from bad governance to some people who are, the miscreants who are carrying out their ill motives. When these miscreants, if you agree that they exist and now get confronted by security agencies, I have seen a video where a bunch of policemen were being chased by some miscreants somewhere up in the north, and they were beating them with sticks. The policemen have their guns with them, but they were still running away. When we get the report of such clashes, and then you bring them to the table and you expect experts to speak as if the police confronted innocent Nigerians protesting on the street, you need to get all the facts right. That's why I started with it being an allegation. You need to get the facts right, but generally, the police are equally Nigerians. They definitely have their mistakes and misgivings, just the way we have our own mistakes and misgivings from the side of Nigerians protesting. So you need to get the facts right before and put in all the things that...
yeah, Dr. Wasagu, and that's why I said alleged in the first place. But then, I mean, not ruling out, hoodlums vandalizing properties. How do you situate some persons who have come out allegedly to say, hey, I was sponsored, I was paid to infiltrate the protesters?
Of course, you will always have that, because, you always have government apologists. You always have people who are beneficiaries of the system. For example, when there is fuel scarcity in Nigeria, for as long as we've had fuel scarcity, it is time for some people to make money. You wonder where these young men on the streets with jerrycans of fuel even get the fuel. You with your vehicle, you cannot get the fuel. So whenever there is some kind of crisis in third world countries, and this is prevalent if you take comparative analysis of most of the third world countries, you see that there are people who thrive on the crisis, so, and it's not enough for us to sit down and equate or judge the system based on those people, because it's like giving in to those who want to just rock the boat, not looking for the progress of this country. Genuinely, people came out to protest, and like we have had, it is a fundamental right of Nigerians, not just Nigerians, every citizen of the world, to protest and air out his opinion. But your right to punch the air ends where my nose begins. You can punch the air as much as you want, but if your punch gets to my nose, you are no longer exercising your fundamental rights. You are not infringing on mine. So those are very sad videos to see that people are being paid to counter protest, the protest that is supposed to ask for their own welfare as well. But then I like what the last speaker, Barrister JB from Lagos said, that, it's always good because you can always protest. As long as we are alive, we can always protest. So, but then, if we have this sentiment of being skeptical about everything that comes out, how do we make progress? How do we move? People need to go and earn a living. Let us see what comes out of it. But it's a bad sight, really. I agree with this. It's a bad sight that people are being sponsored. I don't want to speak on who's sponsoring them, but whoever is sponsoring them is still a Nigerian. And that's a very bad sight for us.
So Stanley, we'll pick it from there. Does it now give credence to the claims by government and the police that these particular protests, before it started, that would be hijacked by hoodlums, and the fact that some foreign mercenaries are also willing to capitalize on these to cause mayhem? Because we've seen that play out, the violence play out in the north. And the question is, or the talk is, if this movement of demonstrations had a face and a structure, maybe it would have prevented the possibility of violence and the escalation of it.
So you would understand that there's a reason why protests recently began to have faceless people, because over time we've had protests where there's a face and those people go in for negotiation and negotiate for themselves alone and leave the protesters hanging. So Nigerians have come to that realization to say, we don't want a face, we don't want anybody to be bribed. If you want to address us, you address all of us, because we're all in these problems together. So having a face to it might also not help this.
But it's not all Nigerians that are protesting.
It's not all Nigerians that are protesting, but most of the Nigerians protesting are also protesting for those that are not protesting, because almost all of us are going through this mess.
So how do you coordinate a protest to prevent it from being hijacked and to prevent the possibility of violence, a narrative played up by the Nigerian police?
It's so that we don't have any protests. And if we're not going to have any protests, the government must begin to do the right thing. Dr. Kelechi spoke about the UK situation, where the level of literacy is high, the standard of living is high. Most of the people protesting, or most protesters in the north barely have education. Most protesters in the north across Nigeria now are hungry. The standard of living has dropped. So if we have all these things in place, I don't think there will be a protest in the first place. So when there is hardship in the land, the end result is, when these protests happen, people who are ready to hijack and take advantage of it are available and waiting for it to happen.
Okay, Mr. Decker, so where do we draw the line between having a peaceful protest that is faceless and structureless and having a protest that is devoid of violence? Because the narrative has always been about, if you have the organizers and the sponsors of this protest come out, identify themselves, they would be able to actually marshal and manage this protest, whether or not it covers the entire stretch of the country, so that it doesn't result into carnage as we've witnessed. So where do we draw the line to ensure that Nigerians are able to express their rights by demonstrations, but then it does not escalate?
The right to express ourselves as citizens, that fundamental human right to self-expression, is protected by who? Is protected by the government. So anywhere in the world where protests are often hijacked by faceless individuals, the government owes that responsibility to ensure that genuine protesters are protected from faceless protesters. And let me tell you, you saw what happened during NSAS. The protesters, we all know them. We all know the organizers, and they were coming out to address people every day. And every time after every protest, they even organize to clean up the entire street where they stayed to do the protest. But what happened? It was when people started sponsoring, other agents, fifth columnists to join that protest. That was when the thing turned violent. And we saw situations where police were there standing and saw some of these faceless urchins come to attack protesters, and police did not do anything. So it rests in the government. It's in government's hand to ensure. It's in this. They use the security apparatus available to them to ensure that protests are not hijacked. I don't expect to see government in welling joining others and welling that protests are being hijacked. Protests should not be hijacked if government and the security agencies do what they're supposed to do. Ensure that it's organized, ensure that the protesters have police protection, first and foremost, and ensure that all the security agencies, we have enough security agents around to police the protests. When protests are properly policed, instead of confronting the protesters, the possibility of it being hijacked will be zero. But if you bring out the police to confront protesters, then the possibility of hijacking is so high. So the only way we can ensure that people protest and it is peaceful protest is to give them protection. Send out the police, send out the civil defense, or the available security agencies. Make sure that they are there, that they cover whatever the protesters are doing, and ensure that there is no breakdown of law and order. That's the simple way it should be done. And all over the world, where you see protests being properly organized, you will see a sizable number of security agencies around to ensure that it does not break down.
Oh, okay, Mr. Decker, talking about the security officers, we actually saw a video making rounds today on social media of the Assistant Commissioner of Police, Paul Okafor, at, in Ojota, one of the grounds designated for the protests to hold, asking protesters there to go home if they desist. What do you foresee playing out?
That is confrontation, which I've already said it, that if the security agents are there to confront, then there's likelihood that things might go south. But if security agencies are there to ensure that the rights of people to hold protests are protected, there's the likelihood of anything going down south or anything, or running out of proportion will be zero. So when you're coming there to say, don't protest, you are also coming there to deny them of their freedom of expression. But when you're coming there to stay there, watch them protest, and make sure that the protests are not hijacked by hoodlums, then things will go well.
Okay. Dr. Wasagu, we know that, or I want to believe that there's no constitution that actually stipulates that protests should be within a particular number of days. It is the protesters that probably determine how long they want to carry on the protest, depending on how receptive the government is to their demands. That on the side, hold on to that thought. The other side is the fact that we know that security personnel usually do reconnaissance before they engage, identify threats, know who has a larger threat, those who are of lesser threats, those who are no threat at all, before you know how to carry on your attack or how to react to a situation. We've not really seen that play out in the protest as we've seen in the couple of days. Is that a challenge for the security operators in Nigeria within this context, or you would look at the number of people they have to manage and say it's going to be impossible for them to do?
Well, nothing is impossible with proper planning. I believe that the police or the security agencies may not have been adequately prepared for what is to come as a result of protest. And like someone has mentioned, the ratio of police to community, the number being greatly inadequate, and then. No matter how prepared you are, we've seen protests even in advanced countries where the mob results to confrontation. If you see what's happening in the UK in the past couple of days, where different factions come together, it's like you separating a fight between two children or two adults who are also holding weapons, and you know how careful you need to be. So there are some very, very unconventional situations that are not detailed by the books. But having said that, generally, I would believe that in some cases the police have been very professional, security agencies have been professional, but in some cases their response, their actions have been quite abysmal. But in all of this, being a political scientist, I always want to mention that from the police to the government to the people on the street, every one of us is a Nigerian first of all. You know, we're all Nigerians first of all, and the way we react is no different. Whether I put on a suit, I'm a news anchor, or I put on a uniform, I'm a policeman, or I'm in the classroom. It's how well and how much of good conscience we carry out our duties determine how we progress in this country.
Well, Dr. Wasagu, I want you to speak precisely to a video. Now I have evidence. A video we saw live of a protester being, questioned or interacting with, a reporter, and then a man passed by and then, slapped him on the face. And we could see from the footage a security personnel just right behind. What do you make of that?
Dr. Wasagu.
Yes, I'm with you.
Yeah, so my colleague is trying to get reaction from you.
I thought you were about to show a video. That was where I was waiting. Well,
no, I'm not showing a video. I'm telling you, situation that transpired.
You see, that was the point I was trying to make. You see, sometimes speaking sentimentally is different from speaking theoretically. I can tell you that in the past couple of days of the protest, I lost a nephew who was hit by stray bullets. So the video you are showing me may not even speak to me as much as the feeling of losing someone as a result of this protest. And that's why I'm telling you that there are ill doings by the police who may be either inadequately prepared, and in some cases, due to institutional rot over the years, they've been overpowered. And then again, on the other side, there are issues about crimes and criminality, which greatly will just outpower whichever institutional framework you put in place. I know an area in Washington D.C. that if you go there and you get robbed, you call the police and they will tell you what took you there. They will not even respond. So you have these scenarios, but when speaking like professionally, you have to speak devoid of sentiments. So that video you're saying, somebody came behind and slapped him and there's a policeman, it could even be a policeman that might have slapped him. And these are the throws and wars that we have been facing in this country, right from the EndSARS that we're talking about, the kind of atrocities that people have gone through in the hands of police, even though we know that there's also the good side, generally, about the police. But when speaking in this context, you need to divorce yourself from sentiments.
Okay, just to point out, we're not being sentimental here. We are very much vested on the facts here at News Central Television.
I'm trying to answer. I'm speaking for myself.
I understand that, Dr. Wasagu.
Answering devoid of sentiments.
I understand that, Dr. Wasagu. Just to point out again, we are vested in true journalism, and we present both sides of the coin. But then we have to take a short break. Stay with us here on News Central TV. Don't go anywhere.
We're still on End Bad Governance, a special broadcast on News Central Television, and we have been talking about all the events that played out during the course of this particular demonstration that started on August 1, and, well, whether or not it's going to end today, we're still yet to know. What is important is the fact that the Nigerian President, Bola Tinubu, has spoken to Nigerians, but then we are not too sure if the protesters feel okay or satisfied with the response of the president as regards national broadcast. Let's intimate you with our guests as we've had them and the new additions that we have. Stanley Ikechukwu is right here in the studio. He's the head of operations SBM. And we also have Kelechi Deka, public affairs analyst, who has been talking to us via the virtual channel, and Dr. Nasiru Wasagu, public and political analyst, also has been sharing his thoughts with us. We have our news correspondent with us, Bernard Akede, who has been covering the protest from day one up until today, and he will be giving us a real-time perspective to what played out at the axis, which he covered, or Jota, as regards the protests, the protesters, how they have actually expressed their grievances, and how the security personnel were able to manage the situation. Bernard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having
And
me.
Kelechi Uzoka, lawyer, social-political commentator, also joins us virtually. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Okay, so let me start with Bernard. From what you saw so far, all the way from August 1 to now, how would you describe the event and how the police were able to manage the situation that we didn't even have what happened in the north happen right here?
Well, thank you for having me. Excuse me. I think, first of all, the police were able to contain the situation with the help of the court to start with. That court injunction stating that the protesters should be confined to 2 locations, it was a huge plus to the strength of the security operatives. What we see, or what we've seen in other states, is that, the protesters were at liberty to march for as long and as far as they wanted to, and that is what led to the crowds that they had. Unlike what we have in Lagos, where if you confine a group of people to a certain place, first of all, the only number of people you can have is a function of the size of the place. So if you say you're confining them to Freedom Park, if Freedom Park can only take 200 people, you cannot have more than 200 people. Again, remember that that park where they were confined to has only 1 entrance and 1 exit. So the people themselves were concerned about their safety, that should they move in there and they are attacked, and they are being attacked, they don't trust that the police would have, will be able to protect them so much. So I think that court ruling was a huge plus for the police and other security operatives to be able to contain the number and to contain the movement.
We'll talk about that injunction in a while and bring Kelechi into it. But I'd like to find out, looking at the numbers now, would you say it has waned, or people are still resilient, despite the fact that the president has addressed the nation?
Well, as at the time I left there, as a matter of fact, everybody had left there.
And what time was that?
That was just about maybe like an hour ago. Yeah, sometime around 12:15, around 12, basically. So there was a gentleman who came there who claimed to have been one of those speaking for the protesters. Of course, some kind of confusion, ensued where some of the protesters said that they don't take orders from him. He's not one of the people speaking on their behalf. He simply identified himself as Barrister JP. So he said the president has spoken. The president has asked that the protest be suspended, and anybody who is flouting those orders or going against that could be seen as committing treasonable felony, which is punishable by the highest punishments, so to speak, in the land.
Okay,
Yeah.
So by way of, let me say, reading the room, do you see this protest being suspended, or do you see it still going on? Tomorrow, are people going to sheath their swords, drop their placards, and go home, or they will do otherwise?
So there's a bit of confusion there for me. What I'm waiting to understand is, for the past few days, from day 1 to day 3, we saw certain key figures who more or less spearheaded the protest, right? But today, not many of them were on ground. So it's almost like, and when we asked, some of the people there said that their leaders were having some kind of meeting and were dialoguing. They even pleaded for the police, or with the police, to give them till 12 noon before they make their decision. By then, their leaders would have finished having the dialogue, and then they will revert to them. However, those people hadn't come back, and that's why I'm saying it's a bit dicey. So now, everybody left there. Even the police, a good number of police officers had left that environment. We don't know what happened after the so-called dialogue. So the whole idea was, after the dialogue, they come back and tell the protesters, this is what we have decided on, we are going to stay, or this is what we've decided on, we're going to leave. We didn't get that response by the time the day was over. So we're waiting to see if they'll still come back to speak and say, oh, our people were deceived, they left there without concluding with us or without hearing from us, or, yeah, whatever they heard is actually from us. So, we'll let bygones be bygones and wait. But I'll end by saying the gentleman who addressed the crowd and addressed us as well, who called himself Barrister JP, said their conclusion is that they will listen to what the president is going to say, it's what the president is going to say, what the result of the dialogue will be, and that if they are not satisfied, they will reconvene on 1st of October.
So can we
which
say,
is Independence Day.
The address of the president had an impact on protesters coming out on the streets today?
I wouldn't want to conclude. I wouldn't want to conclude that it was the president's speech or address that had the impact. I would rather say, first of all, I think maybe because it was a weekend, a Sunday. If you notice on Saturday as well, it took longer time for protesters to come out, and then the numbers reduced. So one, maybe it was because it's Sunday. Secondly, maybe fatigue because they've been out there for 2 straight days, 3 straight days, and then thirdly, again, because most of the key figures who were there, who spearheaded this movement, at least for the 3 days that I've seen, went present today. So it's possible that there was no proper guidance today.
Now, you've actually been covering that from August 1 to, so I must say you actually did a very fantastic job with the crew, NII, and the likes all across the country. Let's talk to Kelechukwu Zoka. He's a lawyer and a socio-political commentator. We need to bring you into this, looking at the court injunction that was obtained by the, of course, military, by the police rather, to actually have the protesters been confined in a particular area. Is that a violation of their rights? Looking at it from the legal angle and morally, does it look as though, or physiologically, let me put it that way, does it look as though there could have been some sort of maybe injury, stampede, or some sort of, anything around that situation happening if these protesters had actually stayed within that particular confined area?
Thank you very much. So the judgment of the court, I wouldn't want to go into the judgment of the court itself, but in my own opinion, I think trying to confine protesters to a particular place to protest, that means you're infringing on their rights. Because that right is the right to self-expression and also the right to movement. All you have to do, all the police needs to do is to provide protection for the protesters to make sure that it's not hijacked. You saw what happened in Abuja the other day. The police came into the Moshood MKO Abiola Stadium and started firing on these protesters. And that is where the court said that they should gather. So imagine having people there, they won't have any place to escape if there's any stampede or if there's anything happening. So it's an infringement on their right, and it is not right. They said they want to protest, they want to demonstrate, they want to show their anger towards the government. The job of the security agencies and the security forces is to guide them, to be with them, not to attack them. Because trust me, if the police are with these protesters, maybe during their march, it's going to be very, very orderly. But we saw what happened in Abuja. Immediately, the protesters tried to go into the MKO Abiola Stadium. They started firing tear gas, and it was said in some quarters that even live ammunition were used on protesters. People without arms, people without ammunition, people who just want better for their country, and they're using live ammunition on them. Even when they're even confined to the place where the court has said, okay, people can stay here and show your anger and show whatever disagreement you have with the government, they still came there and attacked them. So you can't trust the police to do their job. You can't trust them to protect these protesters. That's why they want to be on the road where everyone will see them, where the world will be watching.
Okay, Mr. Decker, rather, I'd like to get your perspective to this also in terms of the conduct of the police and how the protesters have gone about demonstrating their rights within the confines of the law, in a way.
Yeah, basically, some of the challenges that, were raised that led to, the NSAS riots had to do with issues of professionalism, issues of remuneration, and all the things that had to do with the wages and welfare of the police. I mean, when you look at the policemen, you also have to have pity for them because they're also suffering the effects of this economy. And some of them can also be given that leverage to be human. And in being that human, they can unleash their own frustration on the protesters. So these are the challenges we have all around. You know, I said it earlier that the police should be there to provide protection for the protesters, and that's the only way, and that's the best way you can reduce infiltration from fifth columnists and also some of these higher thugs from causing havoc, you know, in the protest. I did mention that fact, and that's where challenges come from. Inability of the police or the other security agencies to provide the much needed protection and ensure that the protests go on peacefully. The protests going on peacefully rests squarely on security agents. They have what it takes to control in every infringement, and they have what it takes to ensure that things do not go haywire. Even though I know that in any human, interaction, there's also the possibility of things, moving out of bound. But if you have the police there that are ensuring that things go the way it should be, that the people express their views, express their whatever they want to express in a peaceful manner, we will have a peaceful protest.
Okay, Dr. Wasagu, let me bring you up here. Let's talk about, we'll still continue to talk about the conduct of the security personnel as regards managing this. Now, the question around even the kind of weapon to be used and how to even use those kind of weapons in the process of demonstration calls to question what the mindset of the security persons or personnel is. Now, our correspondent, Bernard Akede, while you were at the toll gate, you were harassed while you were, given a live feed of what happened at the toll gate. And a few other journalists were also assaulted, so to speak, according to details that we have. Now, Dr. Wasagu, when it comes to the use of weapons, how to administer them to minimize casualties, but at the same time manage situations like this, what should be the focus or the approach of the security personnel, ideally? Can you please unmute your device?
Yes. Okay, sorry about that. I said I'm going to answer very, very quickly. It's a very simple question you are asking. One, just in 2 sentences. One, the fact that I'm no security expert, but globally, what is globally accepted is that there is no way you could go managing protest with live ammunition. That is what I think is very, very wrong and unacceptable. So your question is to what kind of ammunition should be used in managing the protest. I believe there are things like rubber bullets or tear gas. That's if at all things go south, borrowing the words of Mr. Kelechi. If things go south, there are other methods. But what is globally accepted, as in not acceptable, is the use of live ammunition. And I think there is no excuse to that.
Okay, let's come to our correspondent who is live with us in the studio. Bernard Akede covered, one of the designated areas by the court, and that's the Gani Fawayemi Park in Ojota. He's covered the protest from day one. Bernard, just share with us from day one, what's your assessment of the comportment of security officers?
Well, so far, I think I would like to give them a pass mark, at least around the Gani Fawayemi Park area. We could tell that they came in droves. They came in their numbers to start with. They were clearly prepared for this and came in their numbers. You could see them in their riot gear, different groups of police officers. We even had the army in support, the military. They didn't interfere. We could just see them from a distance. I believe it was just in case anything, in case things went out of hand, they probably would have supported. Even at the Lekki toll gate, where nothing really happened, we also had a truck of army officials just standing by in case their help was needed. The police were quite, they did their thing. On the second day, we could see that they had parked 2 vehicles, spreading probably a span of 300-400 meters, maybe, along Ojota Road, ensuring that traffic flow was not hampered by the protesters, also ensuring that the protesters didn't go beyond a particular perimeter. And there was a time when the protesters wanted to march all the way to Ojota bus stop. The police denied them access to go there. When we spoke to the commissioner of police when he eventually arrived, why they were stopping them from going, the commissioner said, you know, what is it that they want to say in this protest that they have not said here, that they want to go and say at the bus stop? Whatever it is they want to say, they can say here. You know, but then speaking to what the lawyer said, it does seem like an infringement on their rights, freedom of movement, you know, basically. Because as some of the protesters also did say, their voices, their protests will not pack as much punch as they wanted if they only stayed in one place to sing songs and chant. It's not a concert, it's a protest. They need people to see them and to know what they're doing. But so far, you know, the police, particularly the commissioner of police, always soft-spoken, tried to ensure that the people felt his presence, but also made them know that he will be there on the ground with them to ensure that none of the police officers gets unnecessarily overzealous and that nobody gets hurt, at least by the police. But he also said he would ensure that they will be protected from any hoodlums coming around. However, I don't think that the protesters were happy, you know, that they were not allowed to express themselves the way they wanted.
So what was the difference between what played out in Ojota and the one you covered at the Lekki toll gate?
So I'll start with the day before the protest, where a particular policeman, and Debola was the one on the news that day, where a policeman, I think again, I'll use the word overzealous. We had gone to the Lekki toll gate and we had, as we always do, which is standard for me anyway, spoke to a police officer, told him that all we wanted to do was to give live broadcast of what it is we are seeing here the evening before the protest starts on August the 1st. He wasn't having it, so he said he would make some calls to be sure that you know, everything goes well. He called the LCC, that's the Lekki Concession Company people. Two gentlemen came. We explained to them as well, we are only giving live broadcasts of what we see on ground. And what we're seeing was police presence and calm. You know, it was business as usual on a Wednesday evening. The two gentlemen allowed us to go ahead, asking how long it will take. I said 10 minutes, and they said we should go ahead. And then we started only for two other different officers to just come. One came and he was one who pulled our camera operator away, tried to yank off his ID card, pushed the headset in front of the camera so we couldn't see, you know. And then eventually everything was happening. It was live, you know. So that was the conversation that we had, and that was what everybody saw, you know, eventually. We tried to explain to them that we were not doing, there was nothing incriminating here. We were not trying to incite anything. We were just giving situation report of how peaceful things were. Unfortunately, they were the ones who broke the peace. But after that, the next day we came to Lekki toll gate and it was still peaceful there until some protesters arrived and the officer in command there said, this is not a designated protest spot as ordered by the court, told them where to go. And then again, the conversation of freedom of movement and where to protest and freedom of association came again, saying, this is Nigeria, they are Nigerians, this is Lagos, they should be allowed to protest where they want. The job of the police is to protect them and ensure that the protest is not hijacked. There was that conversation, and then the lady in charge, who's a police officer, said, if you're not going to listen, you leave us no choice. So while they continued, that's when canisters of tear gas began to be deployed, and the protesters were sent on their way.
And that would probably mean your right to was equally violated because you were just on the line of your job.
I was on line.
And your weapon was just your microphone and your cameraman, and you were disrupted from doing what you were actually meant to do. Yeah. So I'm going to bring this now. Sorry, we are going to take your perspective, Stanley, on this also. But then because this seems to have a legal implication on what rights people have while on their job and while they're protesting. And I want to quickly get the reaction of Kelechukwu Uzoka, because you are the legal person in the room here. It seems as though our reporter, his rights has been violated. And the fact that, you know, we've seen this play out in Abuja with the protesters there, you know, it seems as though the use of live rounds paints a picture of a violation of the rights of these protesters who were trying to match the particular point where they believe their voices will be heard without holding a weapon. I do think there's a legal case here that these people can pick up against the Nigerian police.
Yes, definitely. There's the freedom of the press. There are international conventions that protect this right. There are international conventions that protect the freedom and the rights of pressmen. For example, what happened to your correspondent when he was trying to cover? That's the police infringing on his rights. And that means they are doing something wrong if they don't want your crew to cover the protest and what they are doing there. That means the police knew that they were about to do something wrong and they're going to do something wrong. And even our constitution, even the African Charter on Human Rights, and also the international conventions that protect the rights of persons. There are a lot of legal issues that can be used against the police if this go to court. Because the police, they operated beyond their purview. They operated beyond what they are supposed to do, beyond protection of the citizens. Because at that point in time, there was no way that protest turned violent. There was no way the gathering turned riotous. There was no way that gathering was in any way harmful to the society. So even attacking people who are even gathered at the place that they are not disturbing the movements or the rights of other citizens, and you coming there to attack them, that shows that it's I don't know for want of what, I don't know the language to use, but it's nothing within the bounds of the law, within the bounds of the Police Act that said that the police is there for the protection and guidance of the security and lives of property. So they went beyond their powers, they went beyond what they are supposed to do, sort of protecting. They now started attacking them. If these citizens decide to retaliate, they'll start using live ammunition and they'll blame it on the citizens.
Okay, let's get the insight of Dr. Wasagu. I don't know if you want to respond to some of the things that Mr. Uzoka had mentioned, but while you ponder on that, I want to talk about, do you feel there is a need for reforms for the police force or even security officers at large? Do we need more reforms? Do we need more trainings for them, or perhaps reorientation to help shape their outlook and also conduct in handling civilians?
Yes. As simple as that, I'll tell you, yes, there is need for reform, because the reform is always good. Reform it's a continuous process. As long as you're alive, there's always need for reform, because human beings and the human life is dynamic. We keep evolving every day. There are new developments to life, especially with this age of technology and all of that. Even criminals today devise newer methods of criminality. So just to answer your question, yes, there is need for reform. There is need for more training on civility and human interaction. Starting from the police, yes, to every form of public service to be delivered to the people. There is definitely need for reform.
Okay, just to follow up on that, which you have said, recall we saw a figure regarding the budget for 2024. You see huge sums of money. I recall, if my memory serves me correctly, about 3 trillion naira being allocated to the security, arm. With these sums of money, these chunks of fund being allocated to help reform that sector, our security sector, would we now say it's a problem of policy, or could it be a problem of accountability? What do you make of that?
Now, when you say 3 million, it will be fair to really break that down to security sector. And you see the security sector starting from the military to the police to the intelligence family, the intelligentsia that is from the NIA, the DIA, the DSS, and all of that. We need to break down what that is for, because all of that money could go for training. All of that money could go for purchase of equipment, or all of that money could go for building of barracks. So until you put the facts right, to know whether there is actually a misplaced priority, or that could actually be, it will actually be helpful towards reforming the police, or that is just a drop in the ocean. But actually the details, the final details need to be put in there so that you could answer the question accurately.
Okay, so we come to Stanley now. In all of these discussions as regards the display of the military personnel and the protesters, it seems as though the religious leaders have not really come out, have not been vocal as they were some years back. Do you feel defeated? Because questions have been asked as to entertainers not coming out this time to lend their voice to the movement, and now the leader seems coy on how this particular demonstration has played out. So do you feel defeated or discouraged by the fact that they are also not vocal on this?
I don't feel defeated in the first place. I've also led a protest, and I got arrested, and I was left to myself to sort myself out. After that, they called me out again for another protest. I didn't go out. So my case could also be a similar case to these people. During the EndSARS, we saw a lot of celebrities come out and show support for it. We saw the likes of Macron, who was arrested, and it took some time before he could get himself out. So I like to think that those memories are still playing out in his head, and the truth is on his own. Every protester there is on their own. When you get arrested, you're on your own, except there's maybe a congregation of human rights or lawyers who are trying to get you out. But we still have up till now some people from the EndSARS protest who are still languishing in jail. There's been an ECOWAS court judgment that's giving winnings to some people who came out to say, oh, we were part of this protest and this was what we went through. But the government is yet to acknowledge that. So being defeated or do I feel defeated if the religious leaders are out to support? No, I don't think so, because at the end, everybody's in for what they want to get. So I don't know what is in for the religious leaders. I don't know the connection they have with the government. But if you have a congregation and your congregation are not able to pay your tithes anymore, so I think you should support this movement, because the purchasing power has gone down. So I'm sure their tithes and their offerings too would have gone down. So I don't know why they are not part of this protest.
Okay, let me digress a bit and pose, away from, churches and congregation members. Let me come to Mr. Decker. I posed same question to you. I posed earlier on to Dr. Wasago. Do you think there is a need for reform, so to speak, when it comes to the, in terms of training, reorientation of security agencies to help them have a better outlook in their conduct, when interacting with civilians?
Yeah, if you go back to the aftermath of the EndSARS protest and all the communique that was made available after the meeting between some of the representatives of the protesters, the police and government agencies, the issue of reforming our security agencies was top on that list. As Stanley earlier said in the beginning of this of this show, what came out of it? The welfare of the security agencies was also on that list, calling for reform. What came out of it? So these are issues that we keep on, after this, we sweep it under the carpet, and until another thing boils over again, and we come out again, and everybody start, talking about it, and in the end, nothing happens again. So the problem we have in this country is inability to follow through, to walk the talk, inability to follow through with agreement, with communiques that had to do with issues like this. Nobody comes up and say, okay, when are we going to implement it? Who is going to do what? Who's going to do this to ensure that we don't have a repeat of such a thing over and over again? And why this country has been where it is because you can go back to even the time I was born, over 50 years ago. You will also find that some of the agreements, some communiques, some regulations that were agreed on, nobody implemented them. And we keep on, piling up until one day, it will boil over.
Okay, let me ask Mr. Uzoka, the lawyer, this question. You've heard what Mr. Decker has said. We seem to have lots of policies, lots of, initiatives, so to speak. But then, like they say, the devil is always in the details of implementation. Beyond reforms, beyond policies, which we have a lot in Nigeria, how can we begin to ensure implementation and then holding people accountable to these policies being enacted?
So this all boils down to leadership. This all boils down to leadership. If there is proper leadership, there will be proper accountability. We've had the Orosenye's report that has been lying fallow for more than 10 years now. Nobody has touched this. No administration has picked it up and said, okay, we are going to implement this report within 6 months, within 1 year. And the will is not there. The political will is not there. And I don't know why. The political will to do good or to follow through most of these resolutions, most of these white papers, it's not there. And it all boils down to the type of leaders that we have in our country. If we have leaders who mean well for the citizens, you will see reports. When reports come out, you see timelines to follow through. And at that timeline, even citizens can ask questions, where are we on this? Have we done this? But no, every time committees are created, reports are brought out, and the report will now be dusted. Maybe if it's close to an election year, another administration takes over, that's the end of the report. Because the next administration might not even want to touch it. That's the end of the report. The 2014 Constitutional Conference has been lying fallow. The previous administration, including this administration, has said nothing about it. The Orosenye's report was just brought, tossed about, and thrown into the trash by this administration, despite it, putting this front that, he wants to implement the report, he wants to look at cutting the cost of governance. So it all boils down to leadership. If the leadership has the political will, then definitely most of these things will see the light of the day to the implementation stage, and the right people definitely would be appointed or seen to head most of these agencies or wherever these implementations would happen.
All right, thank you so much, Kelechukwu, for that submission. Bernard, because we need to let you go, you have a lot on your hands that you have to deal with. I just want to get this correctly. Now, we seem to be in limbo as regards what the reaction of the protesters will be, whether they will continue with the protest, regardless the national broadcast by the president. But then one thing is a point now that we need to point out. The Nigerian government has come out to say that let us dialogue. The ACP, Paul Okafor, has also come out to say, I've been very civil with you. The CP has also spoken to you. It's high time for you guys to go home and let's come to a round table and talk about this. Do you think that would be the safest way out of all this that we've experienced?
Well, to start with, I would start with what some of the protesters did say initially, that now the president is saying, suspend the protest and let's dialogue. There were 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 week before the protest that, the government had been notified for plans for a protest. Nobody dialogued at that time. Nobody called for dialogue at that time. What we saw was the government, sorting out other things instead, meeting other needs rather than actually asking for dialogue. So now the protest did eventually kick off. The government is asking for dialogue. Anyway, talking about...
Sorry to come in. So they said that the president was actually engaging stakeholders in consultation to find the safest way out or the safest way to actually address the protest. That was why they couldn't address it at the time.
Well,
I mean,
whether or not, because the protesters did still complain that their issues had not been addressed, based on the speech read out by the president. So whether or not this will be the safest way out, I do not know. The protests in Lagos have been peaceful, to be honest, right? There had not been any vandalization or vandalism, basically. So telling them to go home basically just douses the flame, so to speak. We don't know if they are going to mobilize again and then come back tomorrow. We don't know if they would eventually say, you know what, since we've all gone home already, let's just keep it that way. There's nothing to say what's going to happen. We'll have to wait until tomorrow to see what happens. If they would want to, reconverge and exhaust the 10 days that they have said, or if they'll look at it and say, well, since we've gone home, let's leave it as it is.
All right, thank you so much, Bernard Akedi, our correspondent, covering the arm of Ojota for this End Bad Governors protest. We have to let you go. Thank you so much for your time, for being here with us in the studio.
Thank you for having
me. And as well as our in-studio guest, Stanley Ikechukwu, the head of operations, SBM Intelligence. Many thanks for your time here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, to continue with our other guests, let's take a short break. Stay with us.
We're still looking at the End Bad Governance protest and all the things that has gone down on Leaf Central Television. We've been having engagements with our different guests. We also had one of our correspondents right here in the studio, Bernard Akede, to share more live perspective to this. And we have currently one of our correspondents again, that is Austin Azu in Delta State. But then let me just, before he comes on, let me intimate you with the fact that Kelechi Deka, public affairs analyst, is still with us. Dr. Nasir Wasago, public and political affairs analyst, is also with us, including Kelechi Kuzoka, lawyer and social political commentator. The three of them are still with us, even as we talk more on this. Now, Austin Azu, you have been covering the protests, if we could put it that way, in Delta State. So we would like you to bring us up to speed as regards what's happening where you are.
Yes, first and foremost, the day 4 of the ongoing nationwide protests here in Delta State seems to be relaxed compared to what you have in other areas like Lagos and other places. But meanwhile, more specifically Asaba and environs, you don't have any protesters on the streets. Most of the places designated for takeoff, we still have the heavily armed security personnel on the ground. And not only that, we equally have some suspected pro-government supporters who are hanging around just to dissuade any other person that might likely come around to begin the protest. So definitely this scares some persons away, and therefore they are not on the streets. But however, particularly we are here in Agbo, a Kasat local government area of Delta State, and this is a particular spot of first day and second day that the protesters took off from, and they proceeded from this place, they processed down to Agbobi Junction, and before they came back to this particular spot, before the council chairman addressed them. But however, we tried to find out from some of the people we met here, why was it that we have not seen anybody on the ground here compared to what we saw about 2 days ago? Obviously, their reply was like they are tired of coming out because some of them will come out, some of them will not be encouraged to continue. So vis-a-vis ditto the fact that in the whole Delta North, we have not experienced any protesters coming out on the day 4 of it. But we have other places like Sapele and Ugele where they had a protest yesterday, and today we still have some information from Sapele that there is ongoing protest at the moment. And not only that, from Sapele houses that the protests have turned to carnival. So it means people going there on daily basis till when it's going to come to the 10th day before they will round it up there in Sapele precisely.
Number of protesters on ground on the streets there in Delta State. What would you say as to the presence of security officers there, and what's their tone like?
Yes, like I said earlier, we have heavily armed security personnel on the ground. They have been stationed all over the takeoff points, designated areas that the protesters are supposed to converge. And not only that, they seem not to have any issue with the protesters. But the most concerned about what's likely going to be happening or what have happened within that area are government supporters who don't want anyone to come out to protest. So obviously this has sent a lot of signals to other people who want to come out because they don't want to have confrontation with the government pro-supporters. So they may likely not come out because of their perception, so that they will not have engagements that will lead to breakdown of law and order. Of course, don't forget too that the IGP and the State Commissioner of Police have issued a directive that the protest should not snowball into crisis or breakdown of law and order. So this may likely be one of the major reasons why supporters, the protesters are not coming out to carry out their functions.
So much for giving us the live situation there in Delta State. And that's our correspondent, Austin Azu, reporting live in Delta State. Many thanks, Austin.
Let me quickly bring Kelechi Uzoka into this and, of course, try to probe your line of thoughts as regards what our reporter said, talking about the protest still ongoing in Sapele axis of the states. Now, we are trying as much as possible to ensure that this particular protest does not snowball into one of our guests has actually painted the possibility of a treasonable offense being pinned on the protesters, because more or less like an executive order has been given by the president that I've heard your cries, let's put an end to these demonstrations and come to a roundtable. If this continues to happen, we don't know what the end for would be. So what is your legal perspective to this?
So, yes, the president has come out to address the nation, address the protesters or speak to them, because I listened to his address and I think, if you ask me, it was filled with hopelessness. There was nothing new there. He didn't address the concerns of the protesters, and he didn't address the main concern of this protest, which is hunger, which is cutting the cost of governance. He didn't tell us how he's going to cost the cost of governance. What that statement, his speech today implies, it's government as usual. It's government still doing the same thing, but we'll just be throwing money. If you guys get it, fine. If you don't get it, it's not our problem. We've just thrown the money out there. There are no timelines. There are on actions that will be taken or whatever they are going to do to assuage the fears of the people. But talking about the legal aspect, treasonable felony, yes, if the protest becomes riotous, there are definitely going to be offenses that those who are found participating in that riot would be charged with. But that is why the police and the security agencies are there to make sure that they guide the protesters, to make sure that the protest is not being hijacked, to make sure that the protest is being followed in an orderly manner. So, but we've not been having that. Rather, we've been seeing the police attacking protesters in different state capitals, in different places in the country.
Okay, let me direct, this question just to get the insight of Dr. Wasago regarding communication now. We've seen the president, make a speech regarding, appealing to Nigerians, to protesters to down tools. Now, recall before this protest, there had been earlier communication, giving a notice ahead of the protest. And it seems as though the people were trying to get across to the government, but the government was not listening until they went to the streets and began to, protest. We've seen same case play out regarding the NLC, where they give announcement ahead of time, saying they are going to call for a nationwide, strike. And then it's until the strike commences before you see, government agencies coming around to dialogue with that, body of the country. My point really is, when it comes to effective communication, do you think the government is doing enough, in terms of their outlook, in communicating effectively with the people in Nigeria?
Well, if you recall, starting our discussion earlier, I told you that there is need for effective grassroots engagement to stamp out this deficit of trust deficit that we have between the people and the government. Of course, behind the scenes, like it has been mentioned, government may be consulting with stakeholders, which may seem to be like some form of inaction on the part of the government, up until when the crisis snowballs and turns out to be an all-out thing for all the citizens to come out and protest or to go on strike. Then you see government coming out with measures to checkmate that as well. However, it does not mean that behind the scenes those concerns are doing nothing. But there is need for improvement in effective communication, starting from grassroots engagement, because as it is today, there is nothing that will come out of the mouth of President Tinubu that people who have made up their minds would accept. I think if you would give right or give room to what the lawyer has just been saying, the leader of the country has spoken, and then somebody will come on air and say that it is filled with hopelessness. Then where do we move from there? But as much as it is his right to have that opinion, you should also give a room to other people's rights, especially the right of the president himself and the government, and to give peace a chance and hope that things will move for the better. The trajectory should look better. But however, there is need for effective communication to be improved, starting from grassroots engagement.
I will hope that will be done. Dr. Nasir Wasagu, a public political affairs analyst, thank you so much for your time. We have to let you go because you have other engagements. And of course, Kelechi Uzoka, a lawyer and social political commentator, we say thank you too for sharing your perspective with us. Gentlemen, thank you so much. But we still have Kelechi Deka, a public affairs analyst, with us, and we'll still be having some other guests to further talk on this. Now, at this point, let me just talk to Deka. Now, we see the Nigerian government, we keep talking about the Nigerian government from the perspective of the presidency, and we've not really dwelt on the subnationals. Now, the government has come out to say that the federal allocation has increased because the subsidy has been removed. There's been an improved fiscal position for the country. Now, how do we begin to hold the government in the states accountable? They keep saying they can't pay 70,000 naira as minimum wage, but their allocation has increased. What can citizens do to ensure that the policies of government trickles down to the people in the states?
Yeah, thank you. Basically, I think what Nigerians should start doing is to, the same measure with which they hold the federal government accountable for some decisions and for some actions and some expectations they have of the federal government. That's the same way they should also hold the state governors accountable. The state government should be able to do more. The state government should be able, they are now, while we wait for the local government issue, the reactivation of the local government, the state government that we presently have, and they are the ones that are closest to the people. And for government, for the impact of government policies to be felt in the lives of the people, the states should be seen, and not just should be seen, the states should be active in bringing about development to the people. Yes, we can say that there's the need for restructuring the system, that so much is in the hands of the federal government, that the exclusive list has so much. But from what we have within the concurrent list, how have the states fared so far? They fared so woefully in the areas of education, in the areas of health, in the areas of infrastructure and rural development. They fared so woefully. So I think Nigerians should start having a kind of a readjustment of expectations and readjustment of thoughts. They should start looking up to the state also the same way they pay attention to the government in the center. But I also know that why there's so much overemphasis on the government of the center is because what we are practicing is kind of a pseudo federal system. In reality, what we have is a unitary system of government, and that's why there's so much power in the center, and there's so much expectation on the center, and that's why so many people look up to who is the president to be the know-all and do-all, and that has been part and parcel of why we have been underdeveloping over the last few years. And until we're able to sort these problems out, until we're able to address some of these inadequacies and some of these structural challenges, we will not be able to have the kind of development that will have a trickle-down effect and impact on the lives of the people. The state governors have a lot of work to do, and they are not doing it.
Now, talking about holding the states accountable, just beyond we always talking about the government at the federal level. What do you say to a state like Gombe State? Governor Inouye has come out to say that they cannot pay the new minimum wage of 70,000 naira because they are not generating as much revenue. What do you make of that standpoint of the governor?
I mean, if you look at that state itself, you also find, sometimes when people say that some states in Nigeria are not viable, I'm shocked about some of these statements. What we have is not states that are not viable, but what we have are states that are being administered by minds that are not viable, by minds that have not been able to stretch out of the usual to see ways of to make states viable. A state like Gombe that has a very huge agricultural resource base, has a very huge tourism resource base, and so many things it can use to generate revenue and be able to stand on its own, is complaining that they are not viable because all they do is to sit down and wait for allocation from Abuja. And if allocation from Abuja does not come, they don't do anything, and they wait from month to month waiting for this. And as soon as the allocation comes, what they do is that they share it and start waiting for the next allocation. That's why there is need for restructuring of the polity so that people will also have a lot of responsibility in their hands, and their people will start looking up to them and start taking them, serious, and start holding them accountable for the high level of poverty in the land, instead of everybody focusing on Abuja.
You touched on something quite interesting. You talked about land mass of Gombe State, viability of the state to generate their own revenue. Now, I want to broaden the conversation to Nigeria. We have in Imota, Ikorodu, the largest rice mill in Africa, and by size, the largest rice mill, third in the world, the third largest rice mill in the world. And here we are as a country. We have a bag of rice going for 80,000 naira. Beyond having the land mass, beyond being viable, what really is the problem when it comes to converting this land mass to generating, food produce for the masses in Nigeria?
You see, any society whereby the average income earner spends over 50% of his or her income on food alone, that society is a criminal society. And there is nothing you can do about it. It's a criminal society. And that's why a lot of things we look forward to, a lot of things we expect are not going to work. Nigeria has what it takes. Let me give you an example. Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt, these three countries alone can feed the entire continent of Africa. But of Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt, it's only South Africa and Egypt that are doing so much in the area of agriculture, in the area of food production that Nigeria is doing. Go and check the quantity of arable lands we have. We have so much places that, you can plant all the year round that are not suffering the kind of climatic challenges that other places are suffering. But we are not making use of it until we start looking inwards and start looking at not just, you see the idea whereby anytime the government is just telling people, go and farm, and we are just, regurgitating this idea that everybody should go to farm. It does not make sense, because if you check the top 10 countries in the world that are the highest food producers in the world, you will also find that none of them have up to 5% of their population involved in agriculture. A place like the United States is one of the top 10 agricultural countries in the world. They have about 2.5% of their population in agriculture. So what we have in Nigeria is subsistence agriculture. When we talk, everybody say he's a farmer. But these are farmers that can't even feed themselves. These farmers that only eat during harvesting season. After harvesting season, they don't have anything to eat. So these are not farmers in the real sense. So we have to rethink our strategy on agriculture. We have to rethink the way we see food production, and we can't run away from mechanization. That's actually what can save us from the challenges we are having present.
Okay, let me bring to fray of our conversation, I mean, one of the bane of these protests and bad governance protests in the first place, about oil, PMS, fuel. Also, you know, talking about our capacity as a nation, Nigeria is the largest producer of crude oil in Africa. Of all the 54 countries in Africa, we are the largest producers of crude oil. And it makes one wonder, such a nation still imports, you know, fuel. I understand, you know, by this directive by the government to Dangote refinery to get crude oil from the, you know, NNPCL, we're going to be saving about $660 million monthly, and that amounts to $7.9 billion annually in forex, as we spend 40% of forex on importing fuel. What is that? What could be the challenges with Nigeria being the largest oil producer, I mean, crude oil producers in Africa, but here we are importing fuel. Do we have a problem of accountability? Is it a problem of policy? Is it a problem of the culture as the people? What really is the challenge with us in this part of the world?
It's all encompassing, you know, and everything also stems from the issue of corruption and is corruption that breeds lack of accountability. And when you think about the fact, okay, we have about 3 refineries, and each of those refineries, none has refined a drop of PMS or a drop of diesel in the last 10 years. And they still have staff that are being paid every month, and they still have huge management. Go and check how much billions NNPC spent on staff remuneration alone in all those refineries. Then you ask yourself, what are they doing there? And all these things are all, you know, areas that are siphoning funds from the government. Then you think about the issue of even crude oil production. What is Nigeria's OPEC quota per day? Are we meeting the OPEC quota? Then you listen to the president today highlight the issue that we are now producing 1.6 1.6 million barrels. Then you ask yourself, this is still short of our approved OPEC quota. Then you have to ask ourselves, what about the issue of oil theft? How much is being drilled in this country that are not even accounted for? Those are some of the things. When you put all these things together, you will be able to understand why we are where we are at the present situation, and why even other issues like others, you know, some of the refineries that are coming up are also having challenges. Yes, I share in the optimism everybody is sharing about the Dangote refinery. But the thing is that I've also lived long in this country enough to also temper my optimisms with a lot of caution. So that's why I'm not so, hyped up about that possibility. Because you look at the fact that from the time of Obasanjo till now, we've been budgeting funds for turnaround maintenance for all these refineries, but none of them is working.
Well, talking about the OPEC quota, that's the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. The last figure given by OPEC was 1.5 million barrels per day, up until 2025. According to what the president gave in his speech this morning, he said we are producing 1.6 million barrels per day. I mean that's above the quota being given from OPEC to Nigeria. Okay, let me.
Yeah, hello?
Yes, I was just speaking regarding the OPEC quota to Nigeria, which is 1.5. And then the president in his remark, talked about 1.6. Yes, like you rightly mentioned, we can't rule out corruption, lack of accountability in terms of the amounts actually being produced and what we actually, get to export. Let me also talk about same, question I posed to the other guest. When it comes to our government in terms of communicating with the people, we have seen in time past where the NLC, Nigeria Labour Congress, will give notices to the government of strike to happen. And they will seem as though not to respond until the strike action actually commences before the government comes to respond. Also, we have seen a case playing out just like we have seen regarding the protest of End Bad Governance. A notice was given to the government to respond. There was no response. And then we have him now addressing, Nigerians as regards the End Bad Governance protest. My point really is, what's your view or perception of the government when it comes to communicating with people?
No, it's been, it's a culture. It's a culture. And to be fair to this government, it did not start today. Some of us are old enough to know that this has been a culture, this has been a way of life of the government, the way the government treats the people. It has been like that for a very long time. And they don't really react to some of these issues. There's no proactive strategy to try to address these things and nip them in the bud before they happen. So they wait and keep on waiting and keep on calling people they call stakeholders. The stakeholders, all those stakeholders that were invited to Abuja like a week ago or so, and they came out and telling a lot of people, don't protest, don't protest. Where were they? The real stakeholders are the people on the street. And nobody, called them, nobody, took them serious. But they're the real stakeholders. So it has been part and parcel of the system. And when you listen attentively to the president's speech, you will also find out, you will also discover that there was this subtle move to try to invalidate the authenticity of these demands, the authenticity of this protest. They try to invalidate it and make it look as if there are some fifth political columnists that are trying to use the youth against the government. And, the president made this statement in up to 3 places where he tried to put it to the blame of some political actors or, going behind. Even the Senate president a few days ago said that they know 1 or 2 senators that are sponsoring it. And those kind of statements and those kind of speeches are efforts to invalidate the genuinity and the authenticity of the demands of the people, that there is hunger in the land, that there is hardship in the land. So those are some of the things, when you look at it, you shouldn't be asking yourself, why are we where we are? And why is it that governments don't react to some of these things until things are so bad?
Well, it's quite interesting that we have a government or an arm of government that says that they have identified the sponsors of a particular protest, but then we've not seen them come out to say that they have identified sponsors of insurgents, sponsors of insurgency, and dealt with them decisively, because it seems their activities wreak havoc in terms of the maiming of lives and destruction of properties in the last 2 decades or thereabouts in the country. But I will put that aside, even as we continue to get details from you and your perspective to this, Kelechi Deka. Right now, we engage our correspondent in Abia State, Chinwe Ogele, who would also be helping us understand if there is still protest going on in that area of the country. Now, Chinwe Ogele, can you please talk to us? Let's get your reaction as regards what's happening in Abia State and the reaction of people to the president's speech this morning.
There's no protest, as always. From the day the protest began across the country, none has taken place in Abia State, nor any state of the Southeast. And today, people have been talking about the president's broadcast this morning. They are expressing dissatisfaction and disappointment, even though they are not part of the protest, but they felt that the president could have done better with the opportunity he had. So a lot of them expected that today the president will be announcing the reversal of the removal of the fuel subsidy. That didn't happen. And also some of the issues that the protesters raised, such as reduction in the cost of governance, running governance in the country. And the president didn't address any of those. So they felt disappointed, and they said the president was just reeling out the things they already knew. they knew about some of the programs that the president has embarked upon, but then they haven't seen much of results from all those programs. So it's a feeling of disappointment for all the people I spoke with earlier and after the address by the president.
Well, the president from day one has come out to say that there is no going back on the removal on fuel subsidy. And that seems to have been echoed in his address to the nation today. But aside that, I'd like to find out, for people in Abia State, is it just the removal of fuel subsidy that is the most important to them, or there's some other aspects that they felt, if the president are touched, would directly affect their lives also in whatever form?
The fuel subsidy removal is at the center of it all. According to them, once he made that announcement, the pronouncement on the inauguration day, it caused a lot of problems. That was what actually, degenerated to the high cost of living we're having in Nigeria. We understand we had situations, with the economy in the past before the coming of this present administration. But then they felt that with that announcement of the removal of the petrol fuel subsidy, everything, escalated. And so they felt that the president could have used this opportunity of the protest to also, reverse the removal of the petrol subsidy. There are other issues. They talk about hunger in the land, but then they still tell you that the cost of the hunger is the removal of the petrol subsidy, because people who farm in their farmlands and bring to the town will have to use transportation to come to the cities to sell their produce. So everything now boils down to what happens if the president is not going to go back on his words on the removal of the fuel subsidy. Definitely, it's going to, the situation might not ameliorate as it is right now.
Chinwe Ogele, thank you so much for the updates. We'll continue to keep tabs with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We still have Kelechi Deka, public affairs analyst, with us on the special program. I'd like to take your reaction as regards what our correspondent just said in terms of the fact that there is no protest. There's actually not been protest in Abia State, but then they feel disappointed by the fact that they were hoping that the president would announce reversal on fuel subsidy, as it is it's actually impacting the transports or the commuting of both human and cargo. But then the president has always said that he's not going to remove the fuel subsidy, and that's actually affecting the region, or the states rather. But then we've seen a state, an Abia State, where the president, according to reports, seems to be working and be trying as much as possible to bring about infrastructural development in the state. So whether or not the president does what the citizens in the state are hoping for, is that a cushioning in what the governor is doing? Because we talked about the fact that subnationals are not really doing what is necessary in terms of the interpretation of the dividends of democracy by this administration.
Governor Oti is doing in Abia State is giving a kind of a psychological boost to the people of Abia State to also believe that it is possible to have a government that can work for the people. So they are just getting that psychological boost, for that state. And talking about the issue of fuel subsidy and the cost, a liter of fuel is selling for about 800 naira in Abia State. So, these people have been buying this for as long as this government has been in power. So it has impacted and this is a business-oriented state where, industries and manufacturing and stuff like that. So this has impacted heavily on some of their businesses and adversely on lives and other things they are doing. So that's where they expected. But I knew that it's impossible for the president to rescind the decision on the fuel subsidy, because that decision was tied to a lot of loans we already collected from the World Bank and the IMF. So there's no way. It's even beyond the president's hand to try to touch the issue of rescinding on removal of the fuel subsidy. It's beyond his hands. So the best thing that can happen coming up refineries to see how a higher number of emerging refineries can help to tamper the situation, and let's have availability of fuel first. Is the availability that is the main issue now. It's not about the cost. I mean, if you're buying it expensive and it is not available, it causes a lot of hardship. But if you're buying it very expensive and it's available, you know that you can wake up this morning and drive to a fuel station and get fuel. I mean, that has a kind of a soothing effect to your plans.
Okay, let me bring to the mix one of the salient points raised by the president during his address this morning. He talked about the student loan scheme, which he has activated to a tune of 45.6 billion naira. What do you make of that in addressing challenges in our educational sector?
It's not really going to address challenges in our educational sector. Rather, what it will help is to help some indigent students or some students who are unable to see themselves through school to be able to pay and see themselves through school. It's not going to improve the quality of education, because this is just a student loan. So if the quality of education is still poor, it's still going to be poor, and the students is going to take the student loan to pay for the poor quality of education. So it's not going to have that kind of effect. The only thing it's going to do is to help some students who were unable to pay for tuition fees or to see themselves through school to have the means of seeing themselves through school.
All right, thank you for that submission. Let's take a short break now. Thank you so much so far for your contribution. And that's Kelechi Deka. We're still having you here with us, but we need to take a short break. When we return, the conversation continues. Stay with us here. Thank you for staying tuned to News Central TV. You are watching Day 4 of the End Bad Governance protest happening across Nigeria. I am Adebola Adiduba here with my colleague, and that's Lekan Onobanjo. We're bringing you updates regarding the protest as it happens across Nigeria. Just to reiterate, we have our correspondents all across Nigeria to bring us live update as they unfold.
And we've actually had reports from Abia State, Delta State so far. We had Bernard Akede in the studio to actually do a recap of what has been happening in Ojota in reaction to the president's official broadcast to Nigerians today. But at this point, we'd like to let you know that we have Ayoyin Kauni, who is Lagos State chairman of the African Action Congress, and he will also be sharing his opinion with us on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, quickly, let's talk to Deka so that we can let him take his leave. He has been very, very resourceful with his response, even as we've been engaging him looking at this protest. Now, earlier on, you talked about the fact that these cash grants or these student loans would not actually have any meaningful impact, so to speak, in the sector, whether or not it would even have impact on the students that will actually be applying for this loan. There are also disbursements to small, medium enterprises and 50,000 naira grant to households, and we cannot even verify if the intended recipients got this money, as against the response of Wale Edun, the Minister of Finance, saying that about 650,000 households got this cash in terms of government intervention. Now, when you look at these sums of money being given out, is that meant to be the focus of government, or channeling the funds that it's getting from the removal of fuel subsidy into the critical sectors of the economy to see transformational change, which can, in a way, directly impact the lives of the citizens?
Yeah, ordinarily, while social interventions like, disbursing funds to SMEs, MSMEs, and student loan and all this kind of thing do have its own impact. But the thing is that if you're allowing the inflation, if you're allowing runaway inflation and you're allowing food inflation, you will also find a situation whereby whatever you will find a situation whereby a student will collect the student loan and the family will use the loan to eat. When people don't understand multidimensional poverty, when you have a system and a country where a huge number of people are multidimensionally poor, when you give a man money to go to hospital and treat himself and he has not eaten, he will use the money to feed first. After all, they will tell you that before you take drugs, you should be able to eat. So if you don't have food, how are you going to take drugs? So these things are connected because these are things we call wicked problems. Issues that have to do with poverty, climate, and all this, they are wicked problems because they are so interlinked that as you're solving one, you're causing problem in the other. So if you're dropping this money to cushion the impact of the economy in the lives of these people, and the economy is still, churning out hardship, churning out economic violence on the people, you will find out that it will erode the initial impact, the expected impact of whatever funds you are using through this social intervention. So that's why the most important thing government should do is to hit at the core of what is causing this economic hardship. They should also think about how do we stem this inflation. This is now beyond galloping inflation. Then how do we stem the issue of rising cost of food? These are the fundamental issues because food insecurity leads to huge areas of insecurity, both physical insecurity, economic insecurity, financial insecurity. Food insecurity is at the core, and that's why all over the world, government makes sure that the issue of food, they have subsidy on food because they know that if people are able to feed, then you have a more balanced society, people you can interact with, people you can engage with. When people can't feed, every other policy will have a challenge. So that's why I think they should start looking at things, because what they're looking at now are things that are, appeal to the people, things that make headlines, and people will say, this government is trying, they're trying, but in the long run, will these things have the real impact we expect them to have? During COVID, we heard about school feeding, that nobody was fed. We heard about people who said they shared money all over the whole place, and people didn't have the money that they shared. So these are the challenges. Address the core issue. Hit the thing at the head. What is causing this economic issue? What is causing runaway inflation? What is causing food inflation? How can we stem them first? If not, you will give people students loan and they will use it to feed their family.
All right, Kelechi Deka, public affairs analyst, thank you so much for your contributions on this special broadcast. We really appreciate your time, your patience, and your responses so far.
All right, let's talk to another of our guests who is joining us virtually, and that's Ayoyin Kaoni, and that's the chairman of Africa Action Congress. Mr. Oni, let me kick off by asking you, what's your impression of the remark or the address made by the president?
Thank you very much for having me. I will just take the lead up from what Nigerians have been saying, and as you have been analyzing on your TV station, that the statement of Bola Ahmed Tinubu is just as watery as what Buhari did for 8 years. The people and the citizens and the majority of Nigerians that came out to protest brought a list of demands which have been streamlined from all the discussion of masses across the country. And they said, meet up this demand. And we are sure if you meet up this demand, it's going to affect, the living of society, the cost of living and everything. But Bola Ahmed Tinubu just went entirely in another direction. It's basically like this man is in another Nigeria of his own. It's basically like this man is living in another continent or another universe. So it's totally shameful. First of all, he did not even address the fact that for the past 4 days now, security agencies have been clamping down on peaceful protesters. At least we have confirmation of 13 people dead. Why are people dying just because of their protesting? You know, you're killing them in the north, you're killing them all over. You're arresting people in Abuja, you are throwing tear gas at people, you are intimidating people in Lagos, thugs are attacking them just because they are protesting peacefully. He's not addressing that. He does not want anybody to take responsibility. He kept mute about that. In another voice, speaking that violent protest, where have they seen any violent protest by the people? Has the protest not been peaceful so far? There has been talks and the security agencies that have refused to allow peace to reign by attacking people. Bola Tinubu did not speak anything about that, but he just went off rail talking to us about loan, talking to us about 1.6 million barrels that Nigerian people are not seeing. I think the president should do better. It's short of what people are expecting for a better country in 2024. Let me insist on that.
Okay, Oni, you were once arrested during the NSAS protest while you were canvassing vigorously in open for visionary leaders in the country. How well would you say that that has resonated with the crop of leadership that we have in Nigeria as of now, looking at the fact that we have a president that has come out to talk about his policies and said there's a need for dialogue, a way of dousing the tension that we've experienced in the last 4 days?
All right. Just as you said, apart from being a politician, I'm a human rights activist, a political activist in this country, and nothing has made me to leave the streets in speaking out from the issues in this country. One of the demands, in the 15-point demand that Nigerians have put forth, is the fact that Bola Tinubu should reform the police, real structural reformation, and so that he can stop all these human rights violations that have been going on over the years in this our country. He's not ready to speak about that. He's not ready to do that. So you are calling for dialogue. Dialogue on what? When you have not even acknowledged the demands of these people. When you have not met the demands of these people.
Well, the Nigerian president has come out to, you know, paint a picture of the fact that this movement does not have a structure, is faceless. So it's even hard to even, you know, accede to the demands of people he cannot identify.
I think that's a very sad statement to make. We know that lawyers of Take It Back movement wrote to the IGP, and the IGP requested a meeting. And the lawyers attended a meeting coupled with some of the leaders, and they even included other leaders across the country. People have been protesting for 3 days. What are you saying that they are faceless? What is faceless? Are Nigerians faceless? 200 million Nigerians. Bola Tinubu might not know all of them, but I see people speaking to him all over the media, BBC, CNN, News Central, everywhere, and you are saying they are faceless. What is faceless? The problem of these people is that they always want to use everything to play political games instead of solving the problem of Nigerians. Bola Tinubu has been given an express way to solve the problem of Nigeria. Instead of him to take advantage of this, he's still trying to cut corners or taking into my political opponent. Which political opponent?
Okay, I understand.
These are real issues that people have raised.
Okay. I understand we have to go now. Thank you so much for your insight, you know, for sharing with us your perspective. That's Ayoyin Kaoni, who is the chairman of Africa Action Congress. Many thanks indeed for your perspective. Okay, just to point out that from reports so far we've gotten from our correspondents all across Nigeria, it appears the protest, you know, seems to be, appears being quelled. But we'll monitor the situation and bring to you live updates as we learn of it. I am Adebola Adeduba. My colleague has been...
And this is just to let you know that we are drawing curtains on this special broadcast and the bad governance protest. But then definitely, as my colleague has been saying, or has said rather, that we will continue to monitor the situation, and if need be, we'll continue to talk about this and get some sort of perspectives and details to bring to you on News Central Television. That's what we stand for, and we are always at your service. I am Kano Banjo. Enjoy the rest of your day.
It's bye for now.